Oh, I'm live. Hello, everybody. Let me make sure I have the right microphone. All right, great. So today we have five. Let me see, do I need these? Yes. Today we have five power yogas. Things to look for in a chart to see if the person is powerful, which means has a lot of command. In society, basically speaking, if they're a king. So this is in a chapter of Phaladeepika called Raja Yoga, which is not the name for a yoga, but the name for yogas that produce rajas, which means kings or people who are very dominant and leader material, leadership material. So we've covered several of these already. And now we're up to text 8. Spacebug is trying to share a Discord that she started. But I'll help you figure out. You got to find the code for it. Then you paste the code or something. Thank you, Karishma Rai, Dr. Karishma Rai. All right, here we go. Ready? So the first one is this: Ashvin Yarudaya Gato Brigur Grihendrair Rishtaschej Janayati Bhupatim Jitarim Nicharyor Griha Mahapahaya Vittasangsto Lagnesha Sahakavina Bahi Chabupam. All right, there's two yogas in here. The first one is if Brigu is an Ashvini. And this is fascinating. He's mentioning a nakshatra, and it's so it's uncommon. He's not usually mentioning nakshatras at all. So this is an unusual thing. He says Ashvin Yarudhaya, if Ashvini rises with Brigu in it. And Brigu is Venus. If Ashvini, oh my God, hang on a second. So much wind. And I hate the sound of this. Tick tock, tick tock. If Ashvini rises and it has Venus in it, and it is Grahendra Drishtash, if it has aspects from other planets, then you will get Bhupati, Jitari, a king who conquers the challengers. So Venus rising in Ashvini while aspected by planets signifies a king who conquers all challengers. What planets, which planets, doesn't matter. How many planets, that's plural. So the more the better. Technically speaking, plural in Sanskrit will be 3 or more. But the basic idea is if Venus is rising, if Venus is rising and Ashvini is also rising, so Venus and Ashvini rising, that's particularly special. What is it about Ashvini? Ashvini is a leader. Ashvini is the horses. The horses lead the chariot. The sutra for Ashvini is that it becomes a leader. The sutra from Taittiriya Brahmana is that Ashvini goes into the town and comes out with followers. Comes out with soldiers following him. So Ashvini is a leadership nakshatra. If Venus is in Ashvini, then you'll be very popular. If Venus is in Ashvini rising, then that popularity karma will be very prominent in your life. And if it's getting aspected by a lot of planets, in other words, if it's the focal point of the chart, then that's going to make the person extremely popular as a leader. Jitari. Jitari means they conquer their enemies, but as you can see from the configuration, I would not so much expect the person to conquer their enemies with clubs and swords. Rather, this is the type of person whose enemies decide that they don't feel like being enemies anymore. They cooperate. Okay? Make sense and sound good? All right. The second part says, Nicharyor griha mahapahaya vitta sangsto. Lagnesha saha kavina bahi bhupam chabupam. It says, all right, if you have the Lagnesh, the Lagna Ishwara, the Lord of the first house, in Vitta, in the second house, that's nice. Why? Because the second house supports the first house, right? So to have the Lord of the first house in the second house is pretty good. The first Lord is in the place where the first house gets supported. Now, just ask if the Lord is debilitated or an enemy sign, then it will be less good. So he says Nicha or Ari. Mahapaya. If it's not fallen, debilitated or an enemy sign while it's in the second house, then that's very, very good. The first house and the second house is good. First house and the second house in good dignity is even better. And if it's Saha Kavina, if it's with Venus, so that's the full yoga. The first Lord is with Venus in the second house without debilitation or enmity, in good dignity. Does it mean just for the first Lord or just for Venus? It would be best if it was for both. It would be best if both Venus and the first Lord are in good dignity. And then what will you get? Bhupam, Bhupati, a master of the earth, which means a king. Any questions about these two? So these are two Venus inclusive yogas. These are two Raj yogas where Venus is being included. So the condition for one is that it should be in Ashwini, rising and prominent, Venus. The condition for the other one is that it should be in the second house. So you see Venus is going in favorable places for it. Venus in Ashwini is extremely attractive. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that a lot of the sex symbols, it's definitely a phenomenon zodiacally that of Aries Venus is very attractive. I would go out on a limb because I haven't done the actual statistical research for this, but I would go out on a limb and hypothesize that a lot of those Venuses in Aries are in, oh my God. Wow, that was from years ago. Now I'm sidereally thinking. I was going to say I would go out on a limb and say a lot of those Venuses in Aries are in Ashwini. Those Ashwini Venuses would actually be in Taurus, which is also very attractive to Venus in Taurus. All right, forget all that mess, the complicated mess. So these two things about Venus. Venus in Ashwini is very attractive because it's the horses and it's the leadership thing. Venus in second house is very good because second house is Vitta and second house is wealth and Venus is wealth. So if these two conditions have to do with the first house and have a lot of focus, then they become very powerful. And then you get kings. Let me see. Do you have any questions about that? Let me get this visual aid up. Meanwhile. Good stuff. They seem clear and logical. You're right, they're very simple. So let me just show you them before we roll past them. See if we remember what they were. Shall we stick with a Capricorn? We'll use Capricorn Ascendant today, if we can. So the first one is Venus. Oh, we can't. Venus and Ashwini rising. It would be hard to put this on this map. Oh, but we would actually be able to do it. Just a minute. So over here you can get Venus and Ashwini rising. So it's got to look like this. And you have to get it to be aspected by a lot of planets. So use your common sense. This is an aspect from another planet, but it's not the best aspect, is it? Why not? Because that planet's debilitated. So we would prefer to exclude that guy or put him someplace where he has a significant aspect for another reason, like here. If it's exactly lined up, then you'll get a significant aspect. Or here, if it's exactly lined up, you'll get a significant aspect. Because every planet has 3/4 aspect to the 4th and 8th position. So what planet would be good in Scorpio? Well, Mars would be really good. So that would be really nice. And you could put Venus, you could put Jupiter somewhere. You could put him here. He's not so, I wouldn't bother putting him here. Because then he gets debilitated. It's not as good. So now you have 3 planets aspecting Venus rising in Ashwini, and this is what Phaladipika is talking about. You can even Saturn would get a 3. This would probably be the best spot for Saturn to aspect Venus from. And you won't get your Sun and Mercury to be able to aspect Venus because of the nature of the astronomy. All right, so there you go. Here's a picture of that yoga. One way to do that yoga. Any questions on that? And then the other one was if you have Venus in the 2nd house, not debilitated or in an enemy sign, with the first lord. All right, let's put that one on paper and see what that looks like. So you have to put Venus in the 2nd house. So it will work for a Taurus ascendant. It'll work for Aries ascendant. You can go through the ascendants and see possibly some places where it wouldn't work. Like for a Pisces ascendant, it would be more difficult. Perhaps. Depending on where Mars is. It would work very well for an Aquarius ascendant. It would work well, probably work well for it would work well for a Capricorn ascendant. It would work well for a Sagittarius ascendant. It may not work so well for a Mars ascendant. You see the beauty in this? This is my astrology series. My video series is Astrology Beautiful. This is all making sense based on how the friendships of things work. So let's just keep a Taurus ascendant. Oh no, that's so complicated. If it's a Taurus ascendant, then Venus is the first lord. So it's a little bit. You can say that this is the yoga, but it's kind of not really the yoga. Let's go to this one. Let's put Venus in the 2nd house. Here. Yeah. And it needs to be with the first lord. So it would look like this. This is a very powerful yoga that I bet you wouldn't have expected it. It's because of the support and the steadiness and the stability that the first house is getting as a result of this. As a result of having its 2nd house be so blessed. All right. I want to look at the next 2 yogas. Let me just make sure we got those right also. I got those right. So those are Venus rising in Ashwini while aspected by planets. Signifies a king who conquers all challenges. We did that one right. First lord in the 2nd house with Venus, not debilitated or inimical, signifies a king. We did that. We showed that one. Let's look at the next one. Bhaumasched ajahari chapa lagna sangstap. Prithvisham kalayati mitra keta drishta. Karmesho navamagatashcha bhagyanato Madhyasto bhavati nripo janai prashasta. Another two conditions here. The first one is about Bhoma. Bhoma is Mars. Bhoma chit, if Mars is Aja, Hari, or Chapa, if Mars is in a fire sign. Aja is Aries, Hari is Leo, and Chapa is Sagittarius. So if Mars is in a fire sign, it's good, because Mars is the fire planet. If Mars is in a fire sign, Bhaumesh Ched Ajahari Chapa Lagna Samsta. If Mars is in a fire sign in the Lagna, Pritvisham, then you become a king. Can anybody, off the top of their head, think of a recent king with Mars in a fire sign rising? Let me know. Bhaumesh Ched Ajahari Chapa Lagna Samsta Pritvisham Kalayati Mitra Ketarishta. And not only should it be in the rising in the Lagna in a fire sign, it should get an aspect from a friend. So what you're seeing in common is a certain planet in the ascendant in a certain condition with aspects. The previous one was Venus in the ascendant in a certain condition, which was Ashwini, with aspects. The second one is Mars and rising in a certain condition, which is the fire sign, with aspects. So you just fill in the blanks here, and you can extend it to come up with conditions that would be relevant for Jupiter and the other planets. We'll do that later after you have mastered the basics. Let me see if you guys figured out who this person is, recent history, who had this yoga, I believe. Mars rising in a fire sign while aspected by a friend. Trumpo, Brandon Scott. And Jonathan also. And Villa. Make astrology great again. So let's just take a look at his chart and see if it's also got an aspect from a friend. Let me grab his chart. Give me 10 seconds to do that. I am getting Donald Trump's chart ready to show you. Mr. Trump. And now I just need to share it. Yeah, not so bad. Let's pull up the whole thing here. Let's blow it up. Not quite aspected by a friend, is it? But the other parts of the yoga are very, very exact. So what do I mean? The other parts of the yoga, it's not just that Mars is in the first house. Mars is actually rising. And that's what he's really saying. He's not really saying in the first house, he's saying rising. So the closer that you're getting Venus in Ashwini to the ascendant, or the closer that you're getting Mars in a fire sign to the ascendant, the more fully you're getting this indicator, the more powerfully it's going to come across. So in Trump's case, his Mars in the fire sign is 3 degrees off the ascendant. As for aspects, let me see if it's pretty exactly lined up with the moon. So it may be getting an unconventional aspect from the moon. Otherwise, it's pretty much by itself. Let's just check the aspect table to the planets. Mars, not many aspects. It's just 45 from the moon. So it failed on that. Now, but anyway, Trump is a good example of this. Pretty much maybe 80% of this yoga. Maybe more, because it's so close to the ascendant. The other thing I want to mention to you is what kind of a leader was Trump? It's not a Venus and Ashvini rising type of leader. I mean, that kind of person is more like a JFK or something. A Mars rising leader is more of a dictator or more of a maverick, rebellious, uncooperative type. And that will also come up in the next text of Phaladipika with the fifth yoga that he talks about. It will really make it clear that the type of leadership is implied by the details of the yoga. Ernest Inima de Loop asks about the nakshatras. Ernst uses a non-conventional nakshatra thing. Ernst is so unconventional that he won't even use a conventional ayanamsha. Not only is he using tropical zodiac in Vedic astrology, he's also not even using a standard ayanamsha. So he's using a very unusual ayanamsha. And although I do like unconventional things, I also like conventional things. I like things that make sense, and doesn't really matter to me if it's conventional on. And to me, his system doesn't make sense, so I don't use it. So I use the simple, basic sidereal system for figuring out nakshatras, which is just a simple, basic lahiri, and I really don't care about 1 or 2 degrees margin of error, because once you get things on the border, anyway, it gets blurry. And so everybody constantly, this is another perennial question, is how come the Vault of Heaven says that it's a different nakshatra than what Victor says? But I thought they were both the same system, because we're not, because he uses a different sidereal system, and also he'll mess around with dynamic house cusps and stuff like that, which I also don't do. Hello, Ernst, if you're watching, which you're not. Now, going to the next one, and if there's not any questions about that yoga, I'll talk about Gandanta at the end if we have free time. All right, so that's the first 3. The first 3 yogas so far is Ashvin Yarudaya Gato Brigur Gahendrai Drishtaschechanayati Bhupatim Jitare. Venus rising in Ashvini, aspected by planets, signifies a king who doesn't have enemies. Jitari. Nicharyor Griha Mahapahaya Vittasangsto Lagnesha Sahakavina Bahi Chabhupa. That's the second yoga, is the first lord is in the second house with Venus, and they're not debilitated or inimical. Then you get a king. The third one is Bhomesh Chet Ajahari Chapa Lagna Sangsta Prithvisham Kalayati Mitra Keta Drishta. If you get Mars in a fire sign, aspected by a friend, then you get a king. And now the fourth one, Karmesho Navamagatas. Karmesha, the lord of Karma Bhava. That's the lord of the 10th. Karmesha Nava is 9. Navamagatas goes to the 9th. Karmesho Navamagatas. If the lord of the 10th goes to the 9th, that's good. It's a basic good thing. It's one of the first things that's like on the list of basic good things. Karmesha Navamagatascha Bhagyanato. And also, Bhagyanath, the lord of 9th house, lord of Bhaga, is Madhyasto, in the middle. Madhya is another way of calling the 10th house. It's because it's the mid-haven, the mid-sky. Karmesho Navamagatascha Bhagyanato Madhyasto. That means if the lord of the 10th house has gone to the 9th house and the lord of the 9th house has gone to the 10th house, that's a simpler. If we weren't trying to write a poem with this, we would just say if you have a house exchange of the 9th and 10th lords. Bhavati Nripo Janai Prashasta. Then if you get that condition, then you get a Nripa. Nripa is a king. Again, he's using different words for kings. Sometimes it's just because of the poetry that he wants to make and he wants to fit things in a meter. But sometimes it's also because of the connotation of the actual effect. So in this case, Nripa means a protector of people, a master of people, an organizer of people, a governor of people. And that's why the word means king. Okay, so to have the 9th and the 10th and the 10th and the 9th, house exchange of 10th and 9th, it's not that unusual. So I think he's under-described this. Then again, it's not that unusual. I mean, it's very unusual to have Venus in Ashvini rising aspected by several planets. So bear that in mind. Whereas it's not relatively, it's less unusual to have Venus, to have the first lord in the second house with Venus in a good sign. So bear in mind, the more unusual the configuration, the more you're hitting some exact thing that some ancient astrologer recognized as being super important. So 9th and 10th is not that unusual. 9th and 10th house exchange. It is certainly a good thing, but check to see what the relative dignities are of the planets. Check to see what else is going on in the chart. And this kind of Nripa will be somebody who's famous amongst people. So that's the fourth one. I don't think you need to see illustrations of these because it's simple. And then the fifth one, this one is a little bit more complexificated. Chapardhe Bhagavan Sahasra Kiranas Tatraiva Taradipo. Okay, so Chapa. You heard that before when it was Ajahari Chapa. Chapa is Sagittarius. I think Chapa is a name for bow, so it's a synonym for Dhanu. And generally, the old concept of Sagittarius wasn't exactly centaur, but it was like a bow, an arrow. So Chapa Ardha is half. So what he's saying here is if you get it smack in the middle of Ardha, smack in the middle of Chapa, right in the middle of Sagittarius. If you get what right in the middle of Sagittarius? The Bhagavan. That's very interesting. That's a name for the sun. Because the sun is so incredibly powerful and overpowering in how much light it has. Therefore, it's called Bhagavan. And Bhaga is referring to the amount of power that it has. So that's also interesting for people who know about Vedic philosophy and people who know about Gayatri Mantra and everything, how the sun is always symbolized, like kind of analogous with Bhagavan. So if you have sun in the middle of Sagittarius, Sahasra Kiranas, with thousands of rays. So in other words, it's bright. So what that practically means is you could put the sun at 15 degrees of Sagittarius, but you can have it in the 4th house. Then it doesn't have thousands of rays. It has 0 rays. It's midnight. Also, if you put it in the 7th house or anywhere between the 7th and the 4th, then its rays are declining rapidly and it's dark. So it wouldn't really meet this criteria of having Sahasra Kirana. However, once you get past the 4th house, you can start to consider it as gaining rays. It's gaining in brightness. So especially once it gets to the 1st house and comes over the ascendant, and then especially if you get it in the 10th house up at the top, near the 10th house cusp, then it's really Sahasra Kirana. So the condition for this yoga is that it has to be in Sagittarius when the sun is bright. So that does rule out many rising signs. You know, you can either have Sagittarius rising or Aquarius rising. You can either have Sagittarius rising or Capricorn rising or Aquarius rising or Aries rising. After that, it starts to kind of lose its rays. So the sun in mid-Sagittarius shining brightly with the moon while Saturn rises. Let's read this whole Sanskrit first. Chapardhe Bhagavan Sahasra Kiranas Tatraiva Taradipa. Taradipa is the moon, the brightest of the stars. Lagne bhanuste ativirya sahita soche chabhanunandana. Chabhunandana. Lagne, in the first house, bhanusute. Bhanusute is Saturn, the son of the sun. So you want to have the sun very bright, and you want to have Saturn in the first house with a lot of strength. Kona, thank you. And he's asking, could these yogas be applied to the sun or moon chart? I think all you need to know is what sun and moon charts are, what divisional charts are, and then you don't have to ask the questions about it. The sun and the moon chart are different angles on the main chart. So if you see a yoga in the sun or a moon chart, then there's some way in which that yoga is manifest. But if you don't see it in the main chart, then it's not a very manifest thing. It's some kind of a subtext, or it's some kind of a twist, or it's some kind of something that's in the background or in the subconscious of the person. So you want to have the sun in Sagittarius while it's bright, and then you also want to have Saturn in the first house. And I'm not sure if we break down the language very much. Ativirya Sahita. Is it exclusive? The next planet being mentioned is Bhunandana, which is Mars. So Ativirya Sahita, is it just applying to Mars, or is it applying to both Saturn and Mars? Ativirya Sahita means Ativirya means very strong. So you kind of want to you can get Saturn to be in Saturn's own signs when the sun is in Sagittarius and it's very bright. And because Saturn signs rise. So you can put Saturn in the first house. Let me show you. The first condition is the sun. Oh, you can't. Oh, you can. Yeah, you can get the sun here, which is still bright. It's got a lot of rays. It's risen and it's climbing up towards the top. It would probably be even better if you put it into the 11th house by pushing Aquarius into the first, but I don't have that set up on the screen. Then you can put Saturn in the first house in a very good condition with great strength. That's what he's talking about. And then he also actually wants the moon to be with the sun. And there's an interesting reason for that, and you'll see where this whole yoga is going. So, Chapade Bhagavan Sahasrakiranas Tatraiva Taradipo. If the sun is in the middle of Sagittarius when it's bright and with the moon, Lagne Bhanusute Ativirya, and Saturn is very strong in the ascendant. Sahita Swoche Chabhunandana, and Mars is exalted. And Mars is exalted. You can only put it one spot. That's what it looks like, friends. Yadyevam bhavati kshtir adipati sangshrutya duram bhayat. Trasta eva namanti tasya ripavo dagdha pratapagnina. The sun in mid-Sagittarius shining brightly with the moon, while Saturn rises and Mars is very powerful in exaltation. This indicates a ruler who is overpowering and fearfully respected. So look what's going on with this yoga. Look at that chart. So what are the principles? The principles is that the malefics are just on the page. The malefics are just standing out. The malefics are in the first house, in ideal conditions. And the other malefic, the sun, is also blazing in a fire sign. in the middle of a fire sign and high in the sky. The moon is invisible. So you won't see softness, shyness, anything. Because the moon is invisible while all these malefics are blazing and powerful. Then you get a certain kind of a leader. You get the leader, and the way that he describes it is quite funny. You get a feared leader. He says you get samshruta duram bhayat, who gets respect from far away because of fear. They don't want to go too close to this guy. Trasteva namanti tasya ripavo, that people get scared just hearing his name because he's super powerful. Pratapagnina. So you can get tyrants, dictators, warlords, that kind of king with this yoga. Any questions? Those are the 5 power yogas for today. We can review them all. Let's see if you have any questions. Yeah, I like this yoga. It's pretty brutal. See, so there's brutality with this yoga, but what do you notice about the brutality or the heaviness? It's not debilitated. It's not debased. It's not debased brutality. You want to see now, where are the benefics? Are they problems or are they doing good? So that would really help you figure out the rest of the equation. If this guy is going to be, who's that guy, Idi Amin? Or if he's just going to be like a powerful Mao Zedong. So in this situation, you have somebody that has powerful malefic energy in good dignity and very, very, very dominant. All right, so to review and then see, I can then talk about Gandanta or address any other questions for a couple of minutes. To review these 5. Ashvin Yarudhayo Gato Brighu Grahendrai Drishtashchanayati Bhupatim Jitarim Nicharyor Grihamapahaya Vitta Sangsto Lagnesha Sahakavina Bahicha Bhupam. Venus, rising in Aries. Rising in Ashvini. Venus, rising in Ashvini, while aspected by planets, signifies a king who conquers all challengers. Why? Ashvini is very leadership, and it's leadership on the basis of charisma. But Venus in Ashvini rising, while it's a focal point of aspects, indicates a person who's an easy person to follow. Or the first lord in the second house with Venus, while they're not debilitated or inimical, you'll also get a king. This kind of king is more like an economic leader or a family person who establishes family type leadership, like leads like a father type of person. Omesh ched ajahari chapan lagna sangsta prithvisham kalayati mitra kheta drishta Karmesho navamagatascha bhagyanato madhyasto bhavati nirpo janai prashashta. Mars, in a fire sign rising, while aspected by a friend, signifies a king. So this is like converse for Venus. Mars will also create a king, but let's put it in a fire sign and make it rise, just like Venus. And then you get a king. While aspected by a friend makes it even more better. And the second one is Karmesho Navamagatas Chabagya Nato Madhyasto. If you get the 10th lord in the 9th house, when the 9th lord is in the 10th house, then you get somebody that people like. So also that's indicating a moral type of person who does good things for people. 1/10 and 9th are in exchange. That's why they're liked. And then finally, the 5th one that we looked at, Chapardhe Bhagavan Sahasra Kiranas Tatraiva Dipo Lagne Bhanusite Tivirya Sahita Soche Chabhu Nandana Yadyevam Bhavati Kshatira Dipati Samshrutya Duram Bhayat Thrastaiva Namanti Tasya Ripavo Dagdha Pratapa Gnina. The sun in mid-Sagittarius shining brightly with the moon while Saturn rises and Mars is very powerful. In exaltation, this indicates a ruler who is over. I didn't need to write that. The sun in mid-Sagittarius shining brightly with the moon, while Saturn rises and Mars is very powerful in exaltation, indicates a ruler who is overpowering and fearfully respected. Questions. So, Cap or Aqua rising should really be the best for this yoga since Saturn has dignity. Yes, that's for the 5th yoga. Space Bug, you could be a monster of a good person where the bad jerks are afraid to speak your name. I think you know something about this. Afraid to speak your name is actually kind of a nice connotation of the way that was worded. Liberty, just thought it was interesting with Venus, and yeah, and what would be significant for this yoga versus the Mars one. I do think that's also quite interesting. Venus in Ashvini is nice. Mars in fire is nice. Nice for leadership. Because if you're doing Venus-oriented rulership, then you want it to be on the basis of how people are attracted to you and like you. If you're doing Mars-oriented leadership, then you want to do it on the basis of your ability to give orders that are commanding and dominant. So you want Mars to be in fire. Okay, got a minute or two, and Chandratan asked about Gandanta. Gandanta is pretty simple. Oh, gone are the days when I had this. Gandanta is quite simple. Gandanta is every 4 signs you have a Gandanta. So you have an order of elements in the zodiac, and if you want to know why the order is the way it is and everything, I have a video series called The Simple Beauty of Astrology, and it's like the 2nd or 3rd episode in that series, which explains that in detail. But yet, there's a certain order when you go sequentially. It'll be fire, earth, air, water, and then that order will repeat. Fire, earth, air, water, fire, earth, air, water, fire, earth, air, water, and you get 12 signs. To go from fire to earth, you're not changing that much. You're changing a bit. To go from earth to air, you're changing a bit, of course. To go from air to water, you're changing a bit. But to go from water to fire, you're restarting the sequence. And you are going from the 2 most drastically different elements. You're going between the 2 most drastically different elements. So this is why it's called the Gandanta. Every sign has an anta, or an end to it, a border. But the one which is really Ganda, or the cleavage, or you can call it the ass crack, the space between 2 cheeks, the place where 2 things press together, is the Ganda. So when you get the anta and the anta, make a Ganda, and that's called the Gandanta. There's, of course, a minor Gandanta between every sign, between every border of everything. But the biggest Gandanta is where the whole cycle of elements restarts. And you will also have other things happen restarting here because of the cycle of elements and how significant things fit into the cycle of elements. Most notable is the Navamshas. Navamshas will restart their cycle also at the end and on a Gandanta. But this is why the basic principle of any anta is that you're undergoing a change. When you go from Aries to Taurus, you're undergoing a change of many things. So, for example, you're changing your ruler, you're changing from Mars to Venus, you're changing your nature, you're changing from cardinal to fixed. But most of all, and you're changing your element from fire to earth. So those are significant changes. And that's why when you put a planet near the border, within the 2 or 3 degrees of the border, it starts to lose. Usually, there's other factors, like maybe it's Vargotama on the border, or maybe it's exactly lining up with something by virtue of being on the border, like Trump, with the way that it lines up with Mars. But generally, without those other conditions notwithstanding, when you put a planet on the border, it loses its efficacy because it's dealing with changing and transitioning between states. That's true of anything, but when you put something on Gandanta, it's facing the most significant change, the most drastic change in the shortest amount of time. So it's just like the basic principle of Bhavasandhi, which is that when a planet is on a border, that's a factor which makes it less effective, notwithstanding other principles that may also be operating. Furthermore, when a planet is doing Gandanta, also notwithstanding other principles that may be operable, it's a magnified Bhavasandhi. I hope that addresses your question about Gandanta. Anything else? Thank you, Marie and Chandra. Well, we don't care about nakshatras with the zodiac because we means me. We don't have them permanently affixed to the zodiac, as the zodiac is affixed to solstices and equinoxes, and the nakshatras aren't. So that's one thing to bear in mind. And also, the nakshatra rulership is also a mistake. It's not a rulership, it's a dasha pattern. So there's that. All right, friends. Ending here. Thank you very much for your company. And I will see you in 2 days for the Bhagavatam stream, and then next week again for this. Here, Shrikant Nair. All nakshatras are unequal in length astronomically. Would you please make a diagram of that? No, you don't get it. Nakshatras are fields based on the moon's movement, the moon's daily movement. They're not unequal in length. The moon's daily movement is 13 1/3 degrees. That's the average movement of the moon per day. Hence, we have a cycle with 13 1/3 degree segments going around the entire sky to fill up the 360 degrees, which is basically the female cycle, right? 27. Now, those divisions are exactly mirrored to the zodiac divisions. The nakshatra divisions are how far the moon moves while the sun makes a loop. So in other words, the sun rising, setting, and rising again, how far is the moon gone? While the sun rises, sets, and rises. That's 13 1/3 degrees. That establishes the size of a nakshatra. The zodiac signs are the mirror image of that. It's how far does the sun move while the moon makes a loop. Nakshatras are how far does the moon move while the sun makes a loop, and Rashis are how far does the sun move while the moon makes a loop. Moon's loop takes a month. Sun's movement over a month, 30 degrees of space. So you divide the 360 of the sky into 12 30-degree segments to get zodiac signs. So in either the zodiac signs or in the nakshatras, this is what you're dealing with. You're dealing with these divisions of space of what the moon covers per day or what the sun covers per month. The difference is what they're affixed to. What are these little theoretical slices affixed to in the sky? The nakshatra slices are affixed to yogataras, affixing stars, anchoring stars. The zodiac divisions are affixed to Vishuvat and Ayanam, the equinox and solstice cross. Vachakrana Bhau Vishuvat Dutiyam Samasutragam. Ayanam Samasutragam. The triangle drawn between the equinoxes and solstices is what the affixes the zodiac wheel. Right. So there's the nakshatras are yogatara based. They're a group of stars based around a yogatara that makes a picture. That picture, like for example, Mula looks like a bowl, or Shravana looks like 3 footsteps. That picture that the stars based around that yogatara make is the rationale behind what divinity is in that yogatara. What divinity dwells in that yogatara? Oh, it makes a bowl, so this is where you put ashes. So Niriti is there. Oh, this is the 3 footsteps. That's Trivikram, so Vishnu is there, etc. The so then the definition will of how the Yogataras relate to the nakshatra fields of 13 and a third degrees is simple and given in astronomical texts. We usually say something. The most modernly referenced one is Chitra Tara is Chitra Madhya. That the Yogatara of Chitra, which is Spica, is exactly in the middle of the field of the Chitra nakshatra. And then that's all you have to do. that will then give you the reference. You don't have to know every reference from every Yogatara to every nakshatra. You only have to know one. But there's other ways of saying it. Some can say that Revati's Tara is exactly at the end of Revati. And then you can draw the rest of the nakshatras like that. And it's basically a half a degree or a degree difference, depending on whose definition you use, which is negligible when you're doing visual astronomy. And it's also negligible when you're doing exact astronomy, because on the borders of things are blurry anyway. As we just talked about with Gandanta and moving over. So the nakshatras are not unequal in length mathematically. The shapes of the thing, the Yogataras and their configurations may be of unequal size, but the field that they are empowering is of equal size. Now you may say, but so-and-so has unequal nakshatra system described. If you like, you can come up with a theory to do that. But the basic theory, which is from Rig Veda, is not an unequal nakshatra theory. It's an equal nakshatra theory. And the rationale of that theory I just explained. Should the stars even be referenced for lunar mansions? Lunar mansions are just the export of Indian nakshatras to Persia. So the Persian astrologers observing the Indian astrologers adopted the nakshatra system. And then they called it lunar mansions. And then the opposite problem happened in Persia to the problem that happened in India. The problem in India that happened is that they took the Rashis and they welded the Rashis to the nakshatras. The problem that happened in Persia is they took the nakshatras, aka lunar mansions, and welded them to the Rashis. So both of them made mistakes. But yes, the stars should be referenced. The stars are the reference. The Yogatara is the reference for the nakshatra. The shape of the Yogatara asterism is the reason why the nakshatra has its deity. And the actual physicality of the astronomy of where the nakshatras are is established in reference to those Yogataras. Where the exact geometric reference only has to be specified by one, usually Chitra. Okay, I shall take Inima de Loop's advice. Spacebug, the fixed stars are just placeholders for the movements of the moon. The fixed stars are the fixed stars. The fixed stars are placeholders. The fixed stars are the anchoring points for the nakshatras or the lunar mansions. But the fixed stars are also the fixed stars. So, for example, what's common in Western astrology is you'll say something like, "Oh my God, Donald Trump has Mars conjoined Regulus." Regulus is the Yogatara for Magga. So that's also a thing. In the Mahabharata too, they'll say Saturn is conjoined with Magga, Tara. They're also looking at that. That's another thing. Besides, another sidereal factor besides the nakshatra field is the actual star, the location of the actual star. If you have a planet occlude a star, go in front of a star, it's a big deal. If you have a planet conjoin a star, it's less of a big deal, but still a big deal, etc. So you will get similar implications in your interpretation as you would for having a planet in the nakshatra if you have it conjoin the Tara. And if if you want to say, the more powerfully the planet is conjoined to the nakshatra, it would be based on proximity to the actual tara or the star. But bear in mind that these taras are kind of all over the place, north and south, these stars. Grazie. I'll see you all later.